When you move to Mexico, finding your home is only the first step. Eventually, you're going to discover the heart of your community and how to give back. And today, we're going to take you on part of that adventure. Hi, I'm KJ with Truly Remarkable Life. You know, when people come here to Ajijic, they are going to look for the beautiful views. I mean, I'm standing here in our garden in our own home. And some people come for the views. They want to relax, slower pace of life. They want to get involved in the community. And that's where some of the magic really kicks in your life. So I want to take you guys and show you something that I'm very proud of. I'm involved with an organization called Ajijic Cares, and Ajijic Cares was invited to speak at an open circle event at the Lake Chapala Society. And our executive director, Mitsunari Zapata, came up with this really cool idea to have an intergenerational discussion about sexual health education, the impact of HIV on all of our lives across those generations, and where we as an organization are going forward. So I really would like for you guys to stick around, watch this whole discussion between the three of us, and see how you too can join and impact the community you go to. Okay, so this was a live event that was recorded. So if you hear some weird sound reverberation and all that kind of stuff, it's just because we have our mics, they had their mics, and yeah, you get some weird sounds sometimes. So please stick with us. Really, I hope you watch this entire thing. I'm very proud of the conversation that we had, and I hope that you enjoy.
But I can see a future that's brighter. Yeah. And if we both are in it, it's up to us.
Hello. Oh, there you go. Well, doesn't all that sound very nice? Thank you so much. Well, good morning to all. So happy to see so many faces, so many new faces and known faces. Yes, I would like to welcome you all to this conversation. For those who are not familiar with the work of Ajijic Cares, we're a community organization that has grown so much in the last years. We have learned that sexual education is such a tool for preventing not just HIV and AIDS, but so many other sexuality-related issues. So through our programs, workshops, we go to spaces like schools, county jail, rehab centers. We talk to police force. We work with local government, and anywhere they'll invite us, really. I invite you all to embark in this journey and conversation through our experiences with sexual education and sexuality teachings, our experience with the AIDS crisis and pandemic, our experience working in Ajijic Cares, and our vision for the future. So again, let me introduce our lovely panel of Ajijic Cares leadership today. We have our lovely founder, Bobby Lancaster, with us. Yes. The president of our current board, KJ Purcell-Beard. And myself, Mitsunari Zapata, director and psychologist of Ajijic Cares. Before we start talking about Ajijic Cares and all these things, Bobby, hello there.
Hola, amigo.
Can I ask you, what can you remember of your childhood about sexual education? How was it in your time? What was discussed? What was not discussed?
Very little was spoken about human sexuality when I was growing up. And even in 1974, or I guess that year would have been 75, when I was at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I was in a class called Human Sexuality by Dr. Ajijic Cares, who was one of the leading educators about human sexuality. And in that class, I remember the issue of homosexuality was brought up. And even in college in my sophomore year, there was a silence that came across the classroom. And people said, we don't want to talk about that. So I'm very thankful of where we have become, and that is one of the missions, the new missions of Ajijic Cares, in the creation of a safe space that no young person or even older person needs to be worried about their sexuality and needs to focus on what they can do to benefit our society in general.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm good.
Now, KJ, what would you say is your experience with sexual health, sexual education? How did you grow up?
Well, that's a loaded question.
That's what we're here for.
So I grew up in the South, all over the South, primarily Texas. I was born in 1975, so late 70s and the 80s, and it was pretty much not talked about. For me, my mom and my stepmom both kind of had an open door policy. If I had biological or anatomical questions, that was okay, but don't get into anything else. I remember being there was like a day, I think I was maybe in the 4th or 5th grade, I don't remember exactly, but they came in and they took all the girls away and they sent all of us boys out to the recess field so we could go play and everything, and we come back and there's all the girls looking shocked and scared, and we're like, what's going on? And they're like, we can't talk about this. And I always thought that was just very, very bizarre. And like Bobby, we had a basic health class in high school that gave us some anatomy and biology and flashcards of horribly mutilated genitals, that all had diseases. Lovely. And they're trying to scare the shit out of you. And then I get to college and there's a class on the psychology of human sexuality. And I'm signing up for that. What's going on? What is this? And really started to get more of a formal education. But as far as my childhood, there was nothing except for a group of boys hiding under, the bleachers or whatever, talking about what we thought a blowjob was. And here's a hint. When you're 8, 9 years old, you don't really know. You're making all kinds of craziness up. So it really didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, we were doing this run through the other day, and it was so funny to me that even decades later in a whole other country, I found myself having these same experiences. In elementary, same thing. They took all the girls away, and we were just sitting there wondering what was happening. And in middle school, our biology teacher asked us to bring a cucumber and a condom, find where to get them, and she would teach us something. She was red in the face, and she was shaking and trying to teach us how to do this. And again, I found myself learning more and more that there was a very hush-hush attitude to sexual education still decades later. And again, if you were lucky enough, your sexual education was very medical, again, focused on biology, but no one talked about relationships or orientation or sexual diversity or anything really important. I remember we saw a video on a pregnancy and someone delivering a baby, and that was really fun. But again, there was no further explanation on things that were important in that moment of life. So I find it so important to have these conversations because things are not changing, and silence definitely is an aspect that prevails around sexuality and sexual education. And now, I kind of want to take it back to Bobby. We grow up and then something hits that kind of changes everything. So would you share your experience with AIDS and HIV, how it all started? Where were you? What were the feelings?
Sure. And that is very loaded. I have been an AIDS activist for 40 years. And I get a little emotional still when I talk about the loss of so many friends that I had. And when my partner and I moved here 18 years ago, we attended a production of Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart. At that time, it was called The Naked Stage. And I don't know how many of you know about The Normal Heart, but it is one of the first movies plays originally that was actually created about HIV/AIDS. And the misinformation and the prejudice, etc., that infiltrated our society. So Dan and I were in that audience that night, and we thought Ajijic Cares was just a utopia of liberal people who were informed. And in that presentation, I continued to hear people say, I didn't know. And as I was sitting there with tears running down my face, we went home, and I told Dan, this town needs some education about HIV/AIDS. There needs to be some information. So a group of, and this is in our office constantly, I know it's hard to see today, but in our office, which is right beside the French Bakery and behind La Fiesta, all of this information is there for your viewing. 10 people met in my dining room table, and we said, I think it's time to start educating our community about HIV/AIDS. And it's just wonderful to see some of you, well, all of you, but some of you have been here since our inception, since 2014. And Sally, I want to just read a first paragraph that you wrote in the Ojo de Lago. And it says, whom among us has not been touched by AIDS, the most critical epidemic in recorded history? At a recent cocktail party, a comment was overheard. AIDS, hasn't that been eradicated? Would it surprise you to hear that there are 34 million people in the world living with AIDS? Again, this was in 2014. That number has increased. So we brought World AIDS Day, which is celebrated or recognized worldwide December 1st. We brought that to Ajijic on the 25th anniversary. And World AIDS Day was actually the first day that was designated in 1988 by the World Health Organization, which still does wonderful work. And we had an incredible response from this beautiful community, and many of you are sitting here with us today. So that's how Ajijic Cares was created, formed, and evolved into what I can humbly say is something far greater than ever my expectations was. For any of you sitting in this audience who thinks that an idea can't create a movement, I hope when you leave here today, you will hear how such an idea created Ajijic Cares.
Thank you, Bobby. And before we continue talking a bit more about, the work we do at Ajijic Cares, I do want to know, KJ, what was your experience, growing up during, this whole AIDS crisis, and what was your experience,
HIV/AIDS has shaped my life, the totality of my life. My earliest memories are of HIV and AIDS. My earliest memories are gay cancer, and it's all over the news, and it's magazines, and the images of the young men emaciated and dying in hospitals, dying in hallways, dying at home, and and I'm this little bitty kid, going to school, and people saying, "Don't drink out of the water fountains. There's a teacher here that might be one of them." In my household, all of the adults everywhere in society of my entire life were AIDS jokes, men getting lynched, and then the adults around me saying, "Oh, good, another one's dead." And I'm a little boy, and I know on the inside, I know who I am. And I know, because I'm being taught, that if I ever have sex with a man, I will get this, I will die, and here's some photos that's going to show you exactly how you're going to die. Forgotten by society, the butt of a joke, or someone who's drugged behind a truck. So my entire life has been shaped by that disease, and it's there. That's my whole life is that. And, I remember, going into college. I did not come out till I was 21 years old, and I tried very hard not to be gay. It didn't work. And, I remember going to college and taking that psychology on human sexuality class, and it started opening my mind to things and making me realize things about myself. And I went to my advisor, and she asked me a simple question. She goes, "Do you know why people go into psychology?" I said, "No." She said, "So they can figure out what their own problems are."
Oh,
And it really hit home. And through a series of events very rapidly, I came out of the closet. And what I came out into, I remember going into my very first gay bar. And all of a sudden I wasn't afraid. And there were all these people, and there was this community of amazing, diverse individuals, drag queens, gay men, lesbians, trans people, everyone. And they are united in the efforts to eradicate this disease. Every night was a fundraiser, and it was a lot of fun and all that. But I will tell you, I got more sexual health education when I first came out of the closet, because I walked into a community where your generation took the young men like me under your wings, and you taught us about our bodies. You taught us about diseases. You taught us about safe sex. And I remember one man looking at me and saying, "It is our job to make sure that y'all survive." And yeah, it's that, I don't even know. I'm sorry. It's a very emotional thing, but what I can say is HIV and AIDS impacted my life all the way through.
I think it's so important for my generation to kind of be aware of these stories. There's a quote I really like that says, "He who does not know his history is condemned to repeat it." And I think that is absolutely true. It's through this community that I've really learned all these stories. And because my experience wasn't that, again, I grew up in a very hush-hush community. Even prejudice was kept kind of silent. And it wasn't until I also came out in university that I've kind of heard and been seeing, the prejudice around HIV, but had never experienced it face on until I came out and realized, oh, this is for me. All this hate and this prejudice and having been rejected by nurses at the hospital while trying to donate blood. And in 2024, you would think they would know better. And well, people they just don't know. And I don't say that's a justification for prejudice, but that's why we are constantly trying to create these conversations so we don't forget. And when it comes to HIV, I hear these stories, and I said it last World AIDS Day, it is the Mexican way to turn hurt and grief and all these horrors of life into beauty and teaching, conversation, into color and music. And that is the philosophy that follows us today in Ajijic Cares. I joined an HIV group in university. I had my little stand in campus. I would give out condoms and flyers. We would do quick testing. And again, my view was never, I didn't have a past to look on and regarding HIV, but a lot of hope for the future. I knew things could be better. I didn't look at myself, but everyone around, because these stories kept on coming up over and over. And I knew that if I had a voice and I could kind of take it out to the streets, to my campus, to my community, well, let's do it. And well, lucky me, I found He Cares for that. So, Bobby, do you remember that day we met?
Totally. We had a class at the technological school, and the gentleman who was conducting our classes, he was going to graduate school in Barcelona. So, and this was brought about by my good friend Diana Yela, who was original member of Ajijic Cares. She called this morning to say hello to those of you who know her. And Mitsu was at the front of the classroom, and because I'm white, I don't normally like to go to these things because I don't want the Mexican community to think that we are grooming or trying to change their children. But I said to Diana, we got to get this guy. I don't care what we got to do, we got to get him. and we got him. And I call him my drop-in from God. I mean, that is how talented he is and where he is taking us. And he's just, my greatest challenge now is to keep him because I know so many people love him and would like for them to lead their organizations. But like I said, I've been an activist for 40 years, so you're going to have to go through me, and there will be some blood if that happens.
I remember clearly that day. I, again, had been working at an HIV program at university. I was just almost finishing university, and I knew Roberto, the sexual educator at that time, and he had invited me to be a psychologist somewhere else. I was like, yeah, that's nice, but what you're doing right there, that's kind of where I'm aiming. And he had told me, hey, I'm leaving for Spain to do a master's degree. Why don't you come to one of my classes? And that's where I met Bobby and Diana. And that was the start of a journey, an amazing journey. I remember I joined mid-2023. I started like a little volunteer and intern and quickly became the sexual educator. And by December of that year, I wanted to be director. I didn't know what that meant, but the title sounded nice. And I quickly realized how much it was.
Little did he know.
Little did he know. Famous last words. And since then, I mean, I never thought, one, I would be able to do the work I do in my community. I was sure I was going to have to stay in Guadalajara and kind of work out there, maybe in a nonprofit or like in the government agency, a clinic or something. So to have the chance to do this work here and how it all just came together was extremely serendipitous. I'm extremely thankful. That first year of Ajijic Cares was really redesigning the logo and kind of reinventing ourselves, talking to my old schools that were the first schools that opened their doors to us, the schools where I was a student. Luckily, I was always a big nerd, so they were happy to have me again. And since then, it's been amazing. But another quote I really like is, at some point, the audience starts asking the piano-playing dog, not are you a dog, but do you know how to play the piano? And to me, that's been a depiction of this journey because, the first year was, he's young and he's motivated and he's charismatic and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but does he have the goods? A nonprofit work is extremely tricky. And again, I realized that real quick. And it became a lot, because I was a sexual educator trying to direct this organization, and there wasn't really a slate or a structure I could follow. It was just trial by fire. And that's kind of when I found KJ and hunted his ass down. I want to talk about that, KJ.
Well, you and I had like started building a friendship. We'd like running across each other around town and building a friendship. And then I'm not one of those people that runs around with my resume on my shoulder and telling everybody what I used to do in my former life. But Mitsu found out that I had a number of years in redesigning companies. Okay, actually taking them and turning them from not making any money and restructuring them and turning them into something. And he's like, "Oh, wait a minute! You can help design like a structure for this nonprofit." And so asked me if I would come up with some concepts, and we worked together and did that. And I presented it to the existing committee of people that were running Ajijic Cares, and I thought that was going to be it. And I would smile at some volunteer opportunities and set up some tables. And right then and there, they voted me in as president. And I'm like, that was not my intent. But the truth of the matter is I gladly accepted more responsibility within the organization, because when I started learning about Ajijic Cares and the work that you do specifically in the schools and with kids, it harkened back to my childhood and everything that I didn't know and what I wasn't taught and how fearful I was as a child of everything around me. Because here's the thing, we all have sex. It's like eating, it's like breathing, everybody does it. Okay.
Not me.
Why are we being so weird about this? And, and I just, to me, it was like, if you're able to help these kids not be so confused and scared and all of that sort of stuff, that's wonderful. And we got to talking about it. And I've got to give him some props, because he's Mexican, and I think that, as people from the U.S., we might be able to take a little bit of this back to that country. But when Mitsu started noticing he was getting into these classes with some of these kids, and I say kids, but I mean, I'm talking about everybody 18 down. And he would notice that the enrollment would start dropping out of some of these classes. He started asking himself, why is this happening? What's going on? And he realized that parents were pulling their kids out of these classes. So instead of bucking against that, what did he do? He created educational seminars for the parents to take before the classes start, so he can introduce them to what he's going to be teaching. So that way, when the kids come home and start asking questions, because kids are not dumb. They learn a little bit, and their brains start applying what they might think, and they start extrapolating, and they come up with things. So they go home and ask some crazy question to their parents. Their parents can go, oh, you're just making a jump from what you learned to this, and let me help fix that. But it's ingenious, and watching you take this message and going into prisons, businesses that have high risks of sexual health issues, all of these different places that you go. That's one of the things. A lot of the gringos here, they may know of Ajijic Cares, but I get the question all the time, well, exactly what is it that y'all do? They just think that we're involved in providing medication to HIV positive people. And the reason why the community doesn't see us, because we're in the Mexican community doing the work.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is something I think that is so critical. And it's also extremely important, as Bobby was alluding to, that it's not a bunch of gringos coming down here and imposing our views on things. Mitsu leads this. Mitsu knows he's born here. He leads this. He knows. We support that, because it's not our place to come in and tell people what they should and shouldn't do.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, yeah, that is what I appreciate about Ajijic Cares, is not just our programs, our teachings, like the theory of our classes, but the philosophy behind. How we teach is extremely humane. Information is out there. These kids have access to the whole information in the world. What I'm bringing them is human experience. I had one of my psychologists. She was just starting, and she was doing a class on menstruation. And she was like, me too. I'm just nervous. I've never been in front of a class. I was like, stop, breathe. What I need you to tell them is not, again, the theory, but your experience. You know what it was to have your first period. You know what it was to get your pants stained. Talk about that. How to be a good friend when someone else goes through that experience. Let's bring that to the classes. Let's create actual conversations. And even after we got parents involved, then schools were like, well, I got teachers who teach that class. I was like, then bring your teachers down, and let's also teach them. We all need training on these topics, and no one gets it. No one gets formal training on sexual education. And although it is a right for our children, the mechanisms that need to be in place to ensure those rights are not there. And that's why what we do is so important. But again, we can't do it alone. So a lot of the work recently has been creating networks, As we use sexual education as a tool, we realize that it doesn't just impact HIV and AIDS prevention, but also gender violence, domestic violence, child abuse, homophobia, transphobia, all these other issues, it impacts with this information. So it is our responsibility to be connected to government instances, other nonprofits, other organisms that do this work. Because again, we can't do it all, but we can connect people. We know people enough to hand them over to the correct hands. And I think that has been wonderful. I have received such support from this community. And again, the faith that has been given to me and the responsibility, I would say I was given He Cares like a little baby with enormous potential. And now it's a prepubescent teen trying to find his footing in the world, and kind of an asshole, but he's getting there. He's growing and learning, So, that's kind of where we are now. Again, parent programs, teacher programs. We help people access HIV resources. Any situation that has come up to us, we find a way to create roadmaps for people and have them and take them to the classes. Because again, we have great resources, but they don't work if people don't know they exist. And well, that's kind of where we are with Ajijic Cares now. And Bobby, I would like to ask you, you founded this organization, you've seen it grow. What are your hopes for the future?
Just what we're doing today having a conversation. And quite honestly, I'm kind of thinking of this as a test, because when our season begins, our original focus was the education of our Lakeside teens. But since then, I think it's important to have an education of grandparents. Wow. Our world is changing. Sexual norms are changing. Pronouns. How many of you know what they mean? How many of you have even said, I don't give a shit about that? These are things we need to talk about. The trans community. I have learned so much about the trans community just with my association of Ajijic Cares. And I have heard some of my friends whose grandchildren saying, I would disown them if they became a trans. That's because you have that fear. The same fear that I grew up with. The fear of using the utensils of someone who was living with AIDS. The fear that families had of recognizing a disease just like cancer. So my hope is that when you leave here today, you investigate even more what we're about. And if you have a subject of interest in regards to human sexuality, perhaps we could address that issue in one of these conversations. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Now, a big question that comes up a lot with Ajijic Cares is, we have the red ribbon, the HIV ribbon on our logo, but we do so much more. How do we make sense of that? And again, understanding these stories and realizing that HIV, or what was the AIDS crisis, wasn't just a virus. It was silence, it was prejudice, it was discrimination, it was stigma. And all these factors also affect all these other issues. Again, teen pregnancy, child abuse, gender violence. So it's important that we take this ribbon and transcend it to something bigger, to something larger, to something more important, which is the fight against all these things. And that's kind of our philosophy with Ajijic Cares, is not just the fight against HIV, but the fights against mainly silence, because again, silence equals death.
Right on.
And now,
currently, right now, many of you might also think that syphilis is no longer exists. I will tell you, and I got this statistic from Mason, which is the leading HIV health clinic in Guadalajara. 3 out of 10 people coming in off the street are being tested for syphilis today. So, all of our classes are girls and boys. I originally was a little concerned why the girls wouldn't take the condoms, but Diana told me, Bobby, that's going to make the boys think that's an invitation. She's going to have sex. So, let's just keep talking. And any information that you have in your mind, help us enable you to get that out. And let's start thinking as human, loving people again.
Thank you. And just to close us out, today, again, we heard 3 voices from 3 generations, and again, under one mission. And some other exciting news, for when I just joined Ajijic Cares, I would ask about our nonprofit status, and I was always told, well, we're not there yet, or it doesn't stop us from doing our work. And the project has grown so much that is the case now. So I am glad to announce that next Monday we're signing our articles of incorporation and becoming an official nonprofit. Thank you. It will hold us to a higher standard of transparency, will allow us to receive donations in a formal way, and will allow us to have a more formal structure. And we're so happy to carry this into the future. So thank you so much. Lovely.
The support from the Ajijic community would make the biggest difference in your immediate effective, where you want to go now.
Right. So, I will say, and I heard someone say money, and money is great. Money is wonderful, and that always helps and everything. But I'm going to spin this from a very different perspective. Talk to your friends. Yes. Tell them what we do. There's a very small group of people here whenever you look at the population of Ajijic. Tell your friends what it is we do, because we're not active in the immigrant community. They don't see it. So you can tell them what we do. If our name comes up, talk to them about this presentation and what we do and that sort of stuff. I think that for me would be.
I'd like to ask how you feel about the status of the antiviral medicine that is available now for people who are HIV positive and suffering from AIDS.
Yeah. So when it comes to antiretrovirals here in Mexico, all medication, preventive and actual treatment is free. We're able, anyone who's, yes.
It's not in the United States.
No, I'm well aware. Yes, I mean, options are limited when it comes to the amount of medications they are, but the options we have are really good. I've worked with people who are new diagnosis, people who have been living with HIV for about 30 years, because it is a chronic illness and it kind of pushes you to have a healthier lifestyle. These people are living long-lasting lives, very healthy lives. So yes, we're doing great. We just need to get the word out. Get these resources closer. I finally got a definitive answer on how to bring in medication to Chapala, because most people everyone has to go to Guadalajara to get their medication. And I mean, at least it's a nuisance to go up there for people, but for people who can't afford to miss a day of work to go get their medication and spend money out there to eat and everything, it's very hard. So the road is long and it's treacherous and it's bureaucratic and it's awful, but at least we have a road now. It does happen, actually. For those who don't know, because in the LGBTQ community, we're so knowledgeable about HIV and AIDS, we get tested, we do prevention, we wear condoms, we're well aware of its existence. But when it comes to straight men and a lot of straight women, they don't think of it as a problem. It's still deemed a gay disease, which is definitely not, because HIV does not discriminate.
It's not a gay straight thing. I mean, sexuality is on a spectrum.
True.
Okay, so there's different levels of bisexuality, asexuality, all this sort of stuff. But one of the most critical things, I think, it's very important for them to understand, you can get on medication. Medication can bring your viral count to 0.
Yes.
0 viral. When you are undetectable, it is untransmissible.
Yes.
And so it doesn't have to run their lives. And it doesn't have to ruin their lives either.
Opposition from the church community here, because in the United States, the Christians are really putting a lot of pressure on sexual identity.
Well, my experience, more than the church, it's with government, again, because the work is so large and there's all these government directions and instances that do this work. We've made great alliances with some of them, and in some other cases, I don't feel opposition, but there's a lot of apathy. I think that's the main issue. It's more work, or you're here to take my job, or we've hit a wall with some of them, but I must say that I always said, every time we're faced with obstacles or these challenges, we find a way around it. So all those instances that have said no here in Chapala, they have said yes, state level. So we have made some great state level contacts who have helped us so much in our mission. Yeah.
So any of us.
Sure. We'll gladly. So I would divide Ajijic Cares work in 2 sections. We have a bit of the research behind the scenes side, and then the operational side that goes out into the field. When it comes to the operational side, we definitely need money in the sense that we need to hire. We have volunteers that have grown into contractors, which is amazing. Again, we have a child abuse prevention program right now that they're spearheading. Well, and that as I delegate that program, I'm able to focus more on HIV things. But on the behind the scenes and research, doesn't matter how much time you have, if you're here or not, there's a way to collaborate. We need researchers. We need people who can write articles, help us with website design, taking pictures of events. There's no matter your skill set, we can find a way for you to help us. If you show up, that's enough. We have events where we need to move chairs and stuff. Again, there is help needed. We need hands. It's more getting close to us, figure out your skill set, your history, where you see yourself in this organization, and we can fit you in. Yeah.
You know, and I want to bounce off of what you were saying. As a nonprofit organization, we are different than a lot of nonprofits in the area in that the population of people that we're trying to educate and that sort of stuff, we're talking about younger Mexicans. So we have to have people that are younger so they can identify with them, but we also need people who are fully bilingual because they're going and talking to these people.
Yes.
And so we have to hire people to do that, or this guy is working 7 days a week. Okay. And so it's something that's very, you know, a lot of nonprofits are completely volunteer based, and that's wonderful. But just because of our unique mission and the way that we do it, we do have to hire people.
Yes.
Okay, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. So if you haven't already, go find your truly remarkable life and give back to the community that you live in. Or do that.